TLO, what's poppin'? We are on Twitch. We are live. By the time you see this, we won't be. So just leave a like, comment, subscribe, turn on your post notification bells. Let's continue to grow the family from Chicago to the UK. This is a warning screen behind me. It's probably not going to be necessary for this video, but just in case. Don't forget twitch.com is where you can catch a live stream. You know what I'm saying? Or previous lives. They stay up there for 2 weeks so you can see what you need to see. They're labeled. Usernames at the bottom of the screen. Don't forget we also got a Patreon where we post 5 days a week. Let's get into this, man. This is History Hit. Y'all know sometimes I like to get into my occasional history of the UK. You know what I'm saying? But this one's interesting. The title is, at least, Could You, which is me, and us, could we survive as a British soldier in the First World War? So you gonna take me through here first person and see what the day-to-day life was? Is that what that means? I'm curious. Talk to me then.
Copyright disclaimer. Under Section 107 of the Copyright Act 1976, allowance is made for fair use for purposes such as criticism, comment, news reporting, teaching, scholarship, and research. Fair use is a use permitted by copyright statute that might otherwise be infringing. Nonprofit, educational or personal use tips the balance in favor of fair use. No copyright infringement intended. All rights belong to their respective owners.
Imagine, it's the winter of 1916. War had been raging on in Europe for over 2 years with no end in sight. In some ways, a lot had changed since the start of the war. In many ways, nothing had changed at all.
The line along the Western Front had barely altered despite the best efforts of the British Expeditionary Force and the French Army to break through the resolute German positions. Numerous offensives, millions of artillery shells and bullets, hundreds of thousands of men dead, and to no avail.
But this was a war in which weapons, technology and strategy was rapidly evolving, and at any point a breakthrough seemed possible. Reconnaissance and fighter planes were now...
I'm not gonna lie, this is next level documentary. I ain't never seen nobody go to like a little battlefield type situation.
A breakthrough seemed possible.
Hold on, wait. Like the little reenactment backstage area, have the whole fit on and everything.
Reconnaissance and fighter planes were now heard in the skies above. Artillery now accurately bolstered infantry advances. And for us, the British, tanks were introduced to the battlefield.
Only time would tell if 1916 would be the turning point.
So wait. For the British, the first time they introduced tanks in war was the First World War? Or is that for everybody? Like, no time before this First World War were tanks out there? I don't know. That's why I'm here.
Hoped for. But in this episode, I was heading out of the dugout and right into the heart of the action. Stationed at the front lines in Belgium and France, I'd find out what life was like for the average British Tommy in the trenches.
Absolutely disgusting stuff.
How they prepared for battle.
Fix! Bayonet!
Let's get to
You've
it.
got...
Part 1. Britain. Okay.
It hadn't taken long after war broke out in 1914 for a deadlock to ensue along the Western Front. As both Allied and Central powers entrenched themselves in a brutal stalemate, a series of major offensives and counter-offensives had resulted in staggering losses on both sides, yielding meagre territorial gains. By early 1916, the British Army had already lost more soldiers than in any conflict throughout its history. The deadly, mud-caked stalemate of trench warfare had started to take its toll, and an atmosphere of despondency seeped through the British ranks. After failing to break through the German lines, which stretched from the English Channel to the Swiss Alps, the Allies began to develop a new plan, a big push on the Western Front, which would coincide...
I'm not gonna lie, man. Early in the war, Germany was going crazy. Germans was going crazy early in World War One. Boy, they hopped out on BS, on demon time. It took a long time for the rest of us to catch up. You know what I'm saying?
with attacks by Russia and Italy to the east and south. As with any major offensive, preparation began with mass conscription. Lord Kitchener's campaign, promoted by his famous "Your Country Wants You" poster, had encouraged over 1 million men to enlist by January 1915. But based on the army's casualty rate and the scale of the planned offensive, this was nowhere near enough. The government saw no alternative but to increase numbers by passing the Military Service Act in January 1916. This imposed conscription on all single men.
God. Oh. You gotta go to war back. See, I don't know if man, look.
With certain occupational exemptions, aged between 18 and 41, soon to be extended to all married men when a second act was passed later in the year. Once you got the call, passed some routine medical examinations, swore your oath of allegiance and joined a unit, you'd be sent to basic training camp, where you'd learn army discipline, drill, and how to use your weapon.
I say that I wouldn't do it. It's just in the manner of which they would making you doing it. Like, if you didn't want to go, you didn't have the option. They forced you to go. You know what I'm saying? Because don't forget, I don't know if y'all know this, but like, I signed up to be in the Navy, the United States Navy. So like, you know what I'm saying? So I get it. I was supposed to be flying fighter jets. That's what I got accepted for. I passed my ASVAB like in the top 5%. I be trying to tell y'all I'm a genius. Like, and I didn't even study. I didn't pay attention in high school, nothing. But I passed every test very highly because it just, you could just look at stuff and process of elimination. Anyway, that's irrelevant. But like, I'm trying to tell y'all, I was finna be out there. That would have been my path. Besides this, if I wasn't doing this, I'd be in the military. But something happened. I couldn't go. But I would have fixed it eventually and went.
Following this, a short ferry across the channel, and within days you'd be at the front, where you'd come face to face with your commanding officer. Today, I was reporting to Captain Richard Townsley.
Sir,
welcome to the front.
Well, it's quite a spectacle, Captain Townsley. Tell me a bit about, from the moment that these soldiers are either they volunteer or they're conscripted, what's the process like from back in Britain to the Western Front? What kind of training do they go through and how long does it take?
Well, firstly, what happens is you get recruited. Then you have to go through a series of tests, physical tests. You've got to swear allegiance on the oath of allegiance. And then you've got to go through and see the medical officer. So at that point, then you have to be a certain height, no illnesses, etc. And then once you're passed fit by the medical officer, then you can carry on with your training. Basic training in the British Army in 1914 is 12 weeks. So right, you learn how to soldier, you learn how to march, drill, route marches, physical training, all of those sort of things, weapon handling.
So all that basic training...
Yeah, I hear you, man. But all of that being said, nothing really prepares you for real life in the war. Shout out to Crypto, back again for a new sub.
Starts off in England,
yes,
doesn't it?
Back in the depot.
Right, okay. And then you get sent over by ferry. What happens then?
Then what you need to do is you need to go to battle school. And there's some very famous battle schools at a place called Etaples. Very famous for things called the bull rings. often known as a very sort of brutal place. The soldiers didn't like it. The instructors were quite harsh on them, but you're being trained to deal with the trenches, how to live, how to fight, how to exist in the trenches. So we're talking bayonet fighting, we're talking trench routine. All of that stuff is taught there. When you've then passed that, you're sent to the front.
I ain't gonna lie, when I was about to go, they was gonna put me in them planes, I was about to be up there chilling, battling. You know what I'm saying? Now that I'm looking back on it, I'm glad I didn't, or I'm glad the circumstances didn't allow me. But in the moment, that's lit. And then I was going on there with, like, not as your basic soldier. I had rank. I was going in there a rank higher than everybody else because I scored so high on my ASVAB. So when you score a certain level on the ASVAB, you go in with a higher rank. So, you know, I wouldn't have had to do a lot of stuff. I would have been in that mug chilling, like, but at the same time, can y'all imagine, like, what am I like? Who would I be? Like, that's crazy.
Let's travel back to 1914. You have a lot of men volunteering. There's a big propaganda campaign. We always think of that Lord Kitchener poster. So the people in 1914, they're mostly volunteers, and then conscription gets sort of introduced later on in the war, correct?
That's right, yes. So you have a mass recruiting thing right at the start of the First World War. You see posters, you see all sorts of different recruiting posters. Come and join the front, be part of it. Women of Britain say go, recruiting posters. Come and join the front.
Why would I see this poster and go? This is a fat dude telling me to come join a war that he's not fighting in. That doesn't even make sense.
Front, be part of it.
No,
women of Britain say go.
Yes.
Don't stay at home.
Winston?
You'd want to get to the front. You'd want to be part of the adventure. Don't think of sad Tommies in trenches at this point. Army life, you get paid well, relatively well, a shilling a day.
Yeah.
You get fed well, 4,000 calories a day. And to your,
really?
To your backstreet miner up in Bradford or something like that, up in the north, that's decent food.
It's not a bad deal, is it?
Exactly.
Yeah.
You get medical care, the best medical care anywhere in the world, the finest doctors, the best surgeons, and you get adventure as well. We're talking of a time of the British Empire. You could get sent to India, you could get sent to Hong Kong, you could get sent to the South Atlantic somewhere, or Fiji or something like that. You could come home.
Man, I would have had so many children. Hey, my fault. I'm trying to read, like, I'm just trying to put myself, because that's what the video is. Gee, I would have had so many kids. And knowing me and myself, I would have been trying to keep in touch with all of mine, because at some point, I'm taking care of all of mine. But I would have had about 12 kids. I'm not even going to lie. One in each area I didn't visit. I'm at that stage in life, yes. Now, no.
And after the war, racks of medals, strolling down the high street. All right there, how you going? I haven't seen you for a while.
Absolutely.
War
So
stories.
it's the adventures of the Empire, and of course, you can do it with your mates at the start, right?
Absolutely.
Pals
There's a-
battalions.
yeah.
Tell me a bit about that. These are big, towns and cities you could join up with your friends.
Pals battalions. What a great idea for recruiting. Sign up with your friends, serve with your friends, do your basic training with your friends. You'll never be separated from your mates, the people you grew up with in your streets and in your
So go to war with your homies and possibly leave Earth with your homies as well. What type of tactics is these? I don't even like them. That seems like predatory. Like that's like they're making it sound better than it is. Oh, come with your friends. Your friends are gone. Join your friends. And back then, that's all. I'm pretty sure that this worked heavily.
Whilst the Secretary of State for War believed that overwhelming manpower, encouraged by the opportunity of serving alongside one's friends, was key to winning the conflict, others believed it would be the newly and better equipped Tommy that would lead to victory. By 1916, having learnt from the first 2 years of the war, British soldiers were provided with the best uniforms and military equipment of the time.
Talk to me a bit about what I'm wearing as a soldier in 1916 and whether any of this stuff develops. I know that, for instance, they wouldn't have been wearing this at the start of the war.
Starting at the bottom, we have our our ammunition boots, so our B5s in this instance. So in the First World War, what they do is they apply dubbing to them. What we're trying to do is keep our boots as waterproof as possible.
Okay.
Standing orders say that in the trenches, every day, soldiers will change their socks. That's the one piece of clothing you will change every day, is your socks. You put dry ones, you put things like whale oil on your feet to try and keep your feet dry.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, nobody wants wet feet for long amounts of time. Not only because they're wet feet, but like you can catch diseases through the feet easily. So it would be beneficiary for them to switch your shoes out, right? I mean socks at least.
And I've noticed that when I put these boots on, got spikes underneath, almost like studs.
Like almost like golf shoes.
Yes. What's that about?
This will give you grip. on your boots, stop you falling over.
Yeah.
And also,
it's a weapon.
It will stop the boots wearing out. It's a thing of supply. If you've got 150,000 soldiers who need boots, new boots, it's much better to give them studs at the bottom so they'll wear out and you just replace the studs.
That makes sense.
See, me, I'm using them as a weapon. See, this was my thought process was different. I'm telling. Don't let me knock you out in close combat. You know, I got these boots on. Oh, we're gonna figure it out.
And moving up, we've got this sort of cloth that you wrap around your boots and your trousers.
What we've got here are puttees. Puttees, it doesn't sound like a very English word, does it? Puttees is an Indian word and it means wraps or bandages. The whole idea of puttees
Keep stuff
are
out.
to support your legs when you're marching, to finish off the bottom of your trousers, stop them flailing around in the bottom. And the British Army fights in lots of different climates, places where there might be big scorpions or things.
Yeah,
It
there
stops
you
things
go.
going into your boots,
Right, okay.
that sort of thing.
Infantrymen
sense.
were clothed with a tunic based on Norfolk shooting jackets, with plenty of pockets for personal items and field dressings, warm trousers and webbing which could house 60 pounds of equipment, including rifle rounds and gas masks. The most notable change from the start of the war, however, was what British soldiers were wearing on their heads.
At the start of the First World War, they're marching to the trenches, they're marching off to war, and they're wearing a soft woolen cap on their head.
Unbelievable.
Well, it's all very well. When you're in the trenches, you're protected by the front, the parapet. You're protected by a wall of earth at the back, the parados. What isn't protected so much is your head. And so, late 1915, they introduced the Brodie shrapnel helmet to stop casualties.
Brodie
The
shrapnel.
weird thing is, when they introduced the Brodie shrapnel helmet, they see a massive spike in head injuries that have to be treated in the hospital. So we're having...
Probably because people, dang.
GDP for more USD.
Salute, man. Appreciate the dono.
We're seeing more head injuries. Now we've got helmets. We've now armoured your head, so we're seeing more head injuries. So does that mean the helmets are working?
Well, my guess is actually maybe it means they are working.
More people survive. If you've got a woolen cap on your head and a piece of shrapnel goes through your head, you're dead.
You're going to be dead. Yeah.
If you're wearing one of these things, it may bounce off, or it may penetrate the helmet and be slowed down so much it just becomes an injury. And
Bro,
so
give me
these helmets are
Kevlar.
working, and they're saving so many lives.
Yeah.
The Brodie helmet, referred to by the German army as salad bowl, would go on to be produced over 7 million times by the end of World War I, and would, in a variety of variants, continue to be used by the British Army until the late 1960s. Another piece of equipment, which remained standard issue for British infantrymen throughout the First and Second World Wars, known for taking lives as opposed to saving them, was the Lee Enfield bolt-action rifle.
This remains the same from the start of the war to the end of the war, but it's the trusty Lee Enfield rifle, albeit perhaps with some adaptations.
Right, yes. Okay, so pass it over to me.
Yes.
So this is the short magazine Lee Enfield rifle. Arguably one of the best trench weapons or trench rifles.
I still see some of y'all use these today. Demand them.
It's better suited to the trenches than the Mauser G98. It's well designed, it's accurate, it's fast firing. You've got 10 rounds in the magazine here. The German rifle, the G98, the Gewehr 98, has only got 5 rounds. We've got instant 5 round advantage here. It's fast firing
What? Wait, how many rounds is this one? Wait, no, go back.
in the magazine here. The German rifle, the G98, the Gewehr 98, has only got 5 rounds. It's well designed, it's accurate, it's fast firing. You've got 10 rounds in the magazine.
10 rounds? I get it, man. It's time period. But would you imagine? Just imagine going to war right now with a semi-automatic handgun versus these. I'm tearing stuff up with a handgun. I'm knocking down with a handgun at war. Imagine me going back in time with a G-Lock, with a 100 round. I could single-handedly win the war.
Fast loading. Up here, in, fire, fire.
Rapid rate of fire.
Yes.
Yeah.
You've got pockets for ammunition. On this side, you've got 75 rounds in charger clips. On this side, you've got 75. So you've got
That's a lot of rounds.
150 rounds.
You got 150 rounds ready to be loaded, and that G-Lock got 100 in it, preloaded, ready. I'm just saying hypothetically. I know it's time period specific, but I'm just saying it'd be crazy.
For your rifle, that's about 10 minutes steady firing.
Yeah.
You can take off the entire equipment in one go, like a waistcoat. It all stays together. If you look at the German equipment, if you look at the French equipment, you're putting it on bit by bit by bit, crossing over straps, all this sort of stuff. This is excellent stuff. What you're wearing today,
It's hard to get to.
it looks archaic to us, it looks old-fashioned to us, but this is the best set of equipment that any European army's got.
Having learnt their lessons from the Zulu and Boer wars, the British Army strove to become the best equipped force in Europe, whilst elements of the French strove to become
This is insane. This picture is wild. They could have left this one out. All right.
the best equipped force in Europe, whilst elements of
look
the
like a
French
fair
and German
fight.
army uniforms harped back to the Napoleonic era. With their red pantaloons and pickelhaube helmets, the British had finally ditched their redcoat and adopted an early form of multi-terrain pattern uniform. The Lee Enfield was also a huge step up from the breech-loading Martini Henry and Lee Metford bolt-action rifles used in the wars of the late 19th century. Whilst basic equipment did not vary from soldier to soldier, your rank and role on the front line would determine the weapons you used to defend yourself and your comrades. The Lee Enfield was by and large the primary weapon for the British infantry soldier, but it certainly wasn't the only one used against the
What
Hun.
else? Yeah. Talk to me.
So,
Yeah, let's get into this weaponry here.
Captain, when thinking about the First World War, my mind certainly leaps straight to this thing. This causes a lot of devastation, doesn't it?
Absolutely. So what you've got here is the Vickers medium machine gun. Accurate and reliable. A weapon that was designed around the Maxim gun. In 1912, the Vickers company took a Maxim gun, turned upside down the mechanism inside, and therefore the Vickers gun was born.
Tell me how we would fire this thing.
Okay, so what you do to load it,
Does it swing? I know that one on the wheels, it was hard to maneuver because it can only point one way for a second. Like, you had to really put some effort to move it. You can't just scan.
first of all,
With
you would put
this
the
one.
belt up here, belts of 250 normally, 303, .303. It's exactly the same round as the rifle fires, so the short magazine Lee Enfield will fire exactly so the ammunition is interchangeable.
Right.
You crank a few through, you feed it through, you crank a few through, and it's good to go. You need to keep it topped up inside here with water.
Yeah.
As you fire the machine gun, the barrel's
To
going to
cool
get hot.
it.
And so if you don't have a way of keeping it cool, that
Oh
barrel.
man, I didn't know I didn't know that was what that was. This is a cooling system. It makes sense though. It probably melt on its own. It probably melt if it didn't have that.
will distort and melt. And so they get round the way of keeping it cool, that barrel will distort and melt. And so they get round this with this fluted jacket around here, which is filled with water. At the front, there'll be a hose, and it leads down into a petrol can.
Yeah.
And as the water evaporates through there, it's connected inside the tank down here, and then
And it
you can
goes back
recycle
up?
and refill it again.
So there's a lot of components going on here. It doesn't sound exactly like it's very portable.
Not really. It's one of those weapons that you set up and leave in a certain space. You can use it for direct fire through that way, or you can use it for indirect fire. And so at which point the barrel will be aimed up in the air, and essentially what you're doing is you're firing at a grid reference. And so every so often you choose a grid reference where you know there'd be a crossroad or something like that, and you loose off a belt of 250 at that point. You can't see it, but you know the round's going to go over, and behind the German lines, you know, you'll be wreaking havoc with a machine gun, and they can't even see the gun.
So it's not just firing at oncoming infantry going over the top. You're actually tactically firing over the top of the trenches, predicting where certain targets are going to be.
Absolutely, yes.
Got it, okay. And then the actual process of firing, so
It's a little geometry involved in that then, huh?
I can see here it's a push mechanism, isn't it?
That's right. So you'd use the cocking handle, load it, and to fire it, you have a safety catch here, which you'd have to raise up with your fingers.
Okay.
And so you've lifted it out the way, and then
Yep.
you can now press the trigger.
And then you just simply push in.
Yes.
Right, okay.
Right.
It's very easy to do, but the devastation.
Oh, it
is
swings,
for the
okay.
force. How many rounds is this firing a minute?
250.
So what we're trying to aim for is about 450 to 500 rounds a minute. So we're talking 2 bullet belts or 2 full belts in a minute.
I'm guessing this isn't just going to be manned by one person.
No, so what you've got is you've got specialist troops from the machine gun corps who are...
That's a quick gun for that time period. I mean, it's stuff quicker now, but
firing this one. So you've got four people keeping one machine gun going at any point. One person.
a G-lock with a button with a 30 round, I think it's 3 seconds. 3 seconds, man. Any fully auto now is moving way faster than this, but like the real ones, not modified.
We could speak about who was a member of the machine gun corps. Was a chap called Sidney George Lewis, and he was from Tooting in South London, and Sid decided that he wanted to be a machine gunner. So he does his army training, he does his specialist machine gun training. He gets mobilised, he gets sent over to the Somme area of France, and he serves in the Battle of the Somme in July 1916. Now I've seen Sid Lewis's birth certificate, and what it says is Sidney George Lewis was born on the 24th day of March 1903. 1903 to 1916, how old was he?
He's 13
50s.
years old.
He joins up at 12 and a half. He's the youngest
Dang.
soldier we know about in the British Army in the First World War. Same age as a year 7/8. Imagine a year 7 with a machine gun that could knock down a brick wall at 2 kilometres.
And all they have to do is push a button and they can wreak absolute havoc on the enemy troops coming towards the trench.
That boy's having a time of his life because he chose this. He knew what came with it. That's crazy. 12-year-old out here?
Do you want to know what happened to Sid?
Yes, please, I want to, yeah.
Well,
Did he survive?
absolutely he did, because his mum realised that he wasn't at home. And so
Ah.
she writes to the War Office enclosing his birth certificate and saying, he's too young, send him home. And the War Office they put their arms up and said, fair enough, he's a little bit young here. He was discharged right away. But that doesn't stop.
But bro went through all the training and he was gone a long time. Mom realized a long time after.
Sid. He enlists at the end of the war, still underage, and he goes on to the Army of Occupation in Germany after the war, and then goes on to serve in the Second World War as well.
There's just no stopping some people, is there?
Exactly.
Hey, salute that man. He was a man of business. He was fighting from birth. He wanted this.
There was no escaping brutal combat as an infantry soldier during the First World War. But luckily for me, my time at the heart of the action was limited.
I swear, he was playing COD in real life. That's insane.
That soldiers lived throughout the entire conflict in the frontline trenches is a popular misconception of the First World War. For the purposes of maintaining good morale, a system of rotation was put in place, allowing troops significant periods of respite away from the front line.
Rotation on the Western Front was generally split into a 4-part process. Usually a battalion would spend roughly 10 days or so, there was no exact amount, but a week and a half on the front line, as you can see here, marked with the blue marker. That was the front line there, zigzagged trenches. They then spend another 10 days just behind in the support trench, ready to help the front line if it needed reinforcements. They then spend another 10 days right back in the reserve line, which could be quite a distance away from the first 2 trenches. And then they spend another 10 days away from the front entirely, perhaps on leave in Britain.
For 10 days?
Whilst the soldiers were on the front line, they would have survived on basic rations.
What the hell is that? Biscuits? What is it?
We're talking hardtack biscuits. By the time any fresh bread was delivered to the front, it would have been stale or soggy, and so they relied on these hardtack
You finna bite one?
biscuits. Almost impossible to bite into, so they have to dip them in some sort of liquid. They then have some trench stew for their main meal, a mixture of canned beef and McConaughey's. Absolutely disgusting stuff. But if they were lucky, they could heat that up on their portable Tommy cookers. Every single soldier would have been given one of these so they could heat up their meals. But the most...
Man, if I can get my hand on this stuff, I would try it for a TikTok video. Now this would be... Let me take a picture of this, man. This, I'm gonna go look. That's what is that? Wait, say it again, dude.
And McConaughey's.
McConaughey's.
Absolutely disgustables. But the most important 2 commodities by far were these 2 things: tobacco and tea. Without these 2 items, and of course their daily rum ration, keeping the morale of the soldiers high would have been an impossible task.
We had a most terrible period. The cooks couldn't light a fire. There was no tea. Tea couldn't be boxed up. The matches were wet. The bread was soggy, and we lost our rations and walked about in the mud up to our knees.
It's odd to think
terrible.
that whilst many soldiers absolutely revelled their time away from the front line, some soldiers seriously struggled with returning home to civilization, to their families, to home-cooked meals. For them, the process was just too painful, knowing that in the coming days they would inevitably be sent back to the front line, perhaps never to see their families ever again.
The anticipation of it all.
For the big push, the British hoped to attack the German lines in Belgium, but their allies, the French, demanded a joint operation at the point in the Allied line where the 2 armies met. This location was along a 25-mile front on the River Somme in northern France. Roughly 300 kilometres to the southeast, the German army opted instead for a limited advance in the Verdun area. By taking territory important to the French defenders, they hoped to instigate large-scale counterattacks. These would then fall victim to mass German artillery. The German Chief of Staff, General Erich von Falkenhayn, believed this strategy would bleed the French white. He hoped that the operation might also force the Allies to launch ill-prepared counter-offensives elsewhere, and to some extent, his plan worked. In order to assist their ally, the British would launch their attack on the Somme earlier than planned.
By this time, we realised that something big was being prepared, because we could see the number of guns, new guns, that were arriving on the front, the amount of shells that were coming. There'd been a great shortage before, but now you could see the railways were loaded up with guns, ammunition, wagons, and so forth and so on, and we knew something big was coming off.
Artillery and the machine gun, both symbolic of the deadly and mechanised nature of warfare, would play a crucial role in this offensive. But the Western Front also saw tactics of an era gone by.
So Captain Townsley, we've just seen the devastating Vickers machine gun. Weapons technology is evolving, but the First World War is still a transition period. We still see elements of the Napoleonic Wars, whether it's cavalry charges or hand-to-hand combat.
Absolutely. So I always explain it as a changeover in time. So we start the First World War. Officers are still carrying swords into battle at the start.
Unbelievable.
That doesn't last very, very long at all. They pack them away. They're shit.
The hell was y'all gonna do with a sword? What, like, grow up. Not grow up, but it's over with. By this point, y'all shooting guns. You're done. Ain't nobody about to have a jousting or a fence match. You're done.
In fact, they're only using parades after that. But it's a war where we start with swords, with lancers, with cavalry, with almost Napoleonic tactics.
Yeah.
And by the end of the war, we're into tanks, flamethrowers, chemical warfare,
Really?
airplanes, all of this stuff. Modern combined operations warfare.
But still, there's a key part of the offensive strategy that remains almost still a relic of the 1800s, and that is, of course, fixing your bayonet.
Bro, that much technology passed during the First World War? Y'all went from knives to everything he just said? I don't want to repeat it because, they be on that with me. I don't know why.
To your rifle.
Yes, so before you go into the attack, the order is given, fix bayonets.
Okay, that prompted me to take this out. Whack it down like that. So, fix bayonets. It's what they were doing at the Battle of Waterloo.
Absolutely. So it's very much part of, you are going into combat, you're going into action. The British Army trains with these in the First World War as part of your basic training.
Right.
And so they'll use sort of straw dummies and you'll go in.
Right.
And so
Thought this was Del Boy.
they'll use sort of straw dummies and you'll go in, and it's all about the offensive spirit. Okay?
Yes.
Closing with your enemy, and you will use this when you close with your enemy. It's very important. It's still part of the British Army's training to this very day. Right. They will still train with bayonets.
Because if you...
This seems like it matters, though, low-key. Whatever firearm that you got it on in 2024, I don't see... I don't know. Do you get that close in war now? Yeah, you do, right?
You run out of ammo, or your rifle jams, as they so often did in this period, you need a way of defending yourself.
Right.
It's also partly terrifying your enemy.
Yeah.
If you have a whole battalion, 1,000 men coming towards you with these things fitted, they know that if you close with them, that's going to end up through your gut.
18 inches roughly.
Yes.
Cold steel. And so
Dare I say it? Pause?
how would they have been using them on the battlefield? Is it a case of as soon as they go over the top, they're fixing bayonets?
You fix beforehand. So,
Okay.
so as part of the preparation, the last few minutes beforehand, before you're about to go over the top, the officer's looking down at his wristwatch.
Yeah.
Something that came in very much in the First World War, and you'll hear the order to fix bayonets.
At 7:30 a.m. on the 1st of July 1916, British soldiers climbed out of their trenches and headed towards German lines. Now, the perpetual myth that soldiers would have simply walked like this throughout the war towards enemy positions actually originates from this day. Concerned with the lack of experience of many of the troops taking part, some commanders actually ordered units to walk slowly in waves towards the German trenches. In reality, most soldiers...
That looks like you asking to not be here no more on Earth. Walking towards a opposition's trench, fully standing up. Like, I don't know about that.
soldiers would have ran towards enemy lines, finding shelter in any of the numerous craters littered around no man's land. Now, in the days before the Somme offensive, the British had relentlessly bombarded the German positions, hoping that they would destroy their trenches and their barbed wire defences. Over 1.5 million shells were fired, but many were defective. Moreover, Sir Douglas Haig, the man in charge of the entire offensive, had actually ordered a geographical extension of the bombardment, meaning that many of the German positions had remained intact. More importantly, the Germans were aware that this advance was coming. They had prepared since mid-June. They'd kept their heads down, and so when the time came, they simply manned their defences again and waited for the British to enter into their line of fire.
Doesn't seem like it ended well. W cameraman? Who's the camera guy for this?
We just scrambled over the trench and went forward. Well, we were sitting ducks all the way, straight into the death trap, hundreds of us. I could see people going down all the way around getting shot. Then I got hit myself.
The soldiers were met with a bombardment of machine gun fire, artillery barrages, and a hail of bullets from the well-entrenched German troops. It was a bloodbath. The first day of the Somme was the deadliest day in British military history. Of the 57,470 British casualties, 19,240 men had been killed.
Dang.
It wasn't long before the military hospitals became swamped with the wounded.
Sir, first day of the Somme, 19,000 dead.
Wait, first day, 19,000? I heard him say it, but it didn't process until he said it again. First day, 19,000?
40,000 casualties, just on the British side alone. First day of the Somme, 19,000 dead, 40,000 casualties, just on the British side alone. Tell me.
Isn't casualties death? So 40,000 in total from the whole thing. Okay.
What were the conditions like in these casualty clearing stations after those first few hours?
It's horrific, isn't it? 40,000 casualties. But we've got a clear system for evacuation of the wounded back to the casualty clearing stations, back to safety behind. We often hear about the trenches not moving very often, but it means you can build up your medical services behind. So if you're wounded, first thing you do, use your first field dressing. If you can get yourself back off the battlefield, you do that yourself.
Yes, got that here.
Good.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're reliant on the stretcher bearers coming to get you.
Yeah.
16 stretcher bearers per battalion, that's every 1,000 men. They may double that up with extra bandsmen, etc. During the big battle. The stretcher bearers will bring you off the battlefield and straight down to the regimental aid post, which is in or around the front lines. Okay? Basic system here. First thing, stop bleeding. That's the highest priority. What we'll do, use direct pressure. So if you say you've been injured here, get some pressure on there, stop the bleeding. If that doesn't work, we're going to have to use indirect pressure. And what we use here is the British Army's tourniquet at the time. This works with a pad. You find a pressure point in there, get it in there, buckle it off around there, and then you twist the top. And as you twist, it gets tighter and tighter. Yeah. Okay? Got it. That will stop the bleeding. That's the highest priority. After that, things like pain relief. What we have is morphine. Using laudanum in the 19th century, but at the moment we're using morphine. This is the Army's tablet tin. This is what's issued to the doctors. It contains a variety of medicines and drugs. And the one we're using here would be this one here, which is morphine. Like that. If you've had morphine, it's vitally important to write a big M on your forehead so you can see who's had morphine and so you don't overdose your casualties.
Of course.
Yeah.
And speaking of wounds, what kind of wounds?
So casualties is just injuries as well. Okay. 19,000 deceased, 40,000 casualties. I mean, injuries.
Are we seeing from the first day of the Somme offensive?
So, by and large, the biggest injury is artillery. So we're talking shrapnel, which are
Right.
ball bearings, an anti-personnel weapon fired by artillery over, and explodes like a big sort of, almost like what's called a claymore mine these days, but in the air. We've also got shell splinters. Again,
Right.
the shells detonate in the air to form an anti-personnel weapon. That's the highest wounding agent. 58.5% of all wounded soldiers seen at the casualty clearing stations have that injury. The
Right.
next highest is bullet wounds.
Right.
When you're in the trench, you're very much protected from bullet wounds. When you get out of the trench and you go into no man's land, that's when those injuries occur. 38% of all injuries are caused by bullet wounds. 2% are caused by grenades,
Okay.
and 0.32%, so the official statistics say, are caused by bayonets.
Right.
Tiny proportion. You compare that to the 58% caused by artillery.
3%
So we always think, sometimes
bayonets.
people think, oh, it's going to be the machine gun bullets.
3% bayonets. So after you get around the shrapnel rain, and you've crawled through and ran through and dodged like the Matrix, all of these bullets flying at you. And now you up on close on somebody, and they hit you with a bayonet. That right there would be so demoralizing to me. Like, I made it this far, and I got hit with a bayonet. I gotta go sit down from a bayonet injury. Do you know what I went through to get right here? And now I gotta go to the goulash? Like, what was going on?
causing absolute devastation. It's actually these...
But this is realistically, but like, I'm just saying, like, that's how it's playing out in my mind. That's insane.
These big artillery shells that are just fired in their millions, shrapnel, bits of metal flying off, and you're getting these sometimes gaping wounds, right? What are those like to treat?
The big problem in the First World War is wound infection. We don't have antibiotics yet. Penicillin hasn't been discovered. It won't be discovered for another 10 years after the end of the First World War. So, but we do have antiseptics. We have things like iodine. There's a very famous film called The Battle of the Somme, where a cameraman called Geoffrey Malins is filming the build-up to the battle itself, and the aftermath. And one of the things he's doing is he's filming at a place called Minden Post, which is where there's an advanced dressing station, and you can see the medical officers literally with the wounds painting on iodine with paintbrushes to try and stop the infection. Every wounded soldier will get a shot of this stuff here, and this is anti-tetanus serum.
Right.
Tetanus, lockjaw, you don't want soldiers to get it, so every single wounded soldier would get an injection of this stuff here.
With so many casualties to contend with, a stringent system of orderly triage was essential to effectively treating those with minor and major wounds. A priority of evacuation was established before transportation. Major, even minor surgery was to be avoided at these early stages of engagement. In the presence of major bleeding or wounds of the thorax or abdomen, the soldier was immediately placed in a cart and wheeled to the nearest safe area that would allow the approach of an ambulance. The moderately injured were offered...
And even at that, you will to the nearest safe area, like, you gotta imagine that those areas still got hit sometimes.
transport at night.
Essentially what happens is you go to a dressing station, an advanced dressing station or main dressing station,
Hold
and
on.
you're triaged. Very
Hold on real quick.
much like today. If you go to A&E today, you get triaged or separated into different groups.
Yeah.
If you're severe but survivable, and that's the key, survivable, you're taken back to a casualty clearing station for further treatment.
Right.
Down there, these casualty clearing stations are the linchpin of the whole medical system. They're a big mobile hospital, 500 beds at a minimum, teams of surgeons, x-ray machines, teams of nurses, blood
Right.
transfusion equipment. You're in safe hands if you get back to a casualty clearing station.
And that's like you said at the start, there's a huge amount of casualties, but the British do have the infrastructure. It's not like these sort of, you imagine from the Crimean War, these makeshift hospitals and there's dirt and rats everywhere and just blood and gore. There's an efficient process for the soldiers.
Absolutely, yes. So you know, it's 40,000 casualties on the first day of the Somme, in the morning of the first day of the Somme, on the 1st of July 1916. You imagine any medical system in the world that could have to cope with 40,000 casualties coming.
Hell no, not even Meredith Grey could handle that. You know what I'm saying?
Streaming through. The official statistics say if you get back to the safety of one of these casualty clearing stations, 97% survive.
Wow. Okay.
So they're doing something incredibly well at these casualty clearing stations. And it's a tribute to the men of the Royal Army Medical Corps and the nursing professions, the Queen Alexandra's Imperial Military Nursing Service, the VADs. And so
That's an impressive number.
Almost 19,000 dead.
97% success rate. Now, I want to say something. That could also be contributed to people that didn't want to be there, getting the slightest injury and going back there. Oh, I got grazed. Let's make it happen.
It just shows you the scale of devastation during the Battle of the Somme. You know, these are wounds that are irreparable. Now, if I was to come here, let's say, with a bullet wound or a piece of shrapnel in my leg, what are the sort of tools and medicines you'd be using to treat me?
Right, firstly, I mean, that's something for the casualty clearing stations. So you'd end up down there. You'd end up with these big hospitals. Some of the kit they'd be using would be, there you go. This is one of the operating sets that they would have used back then. This has all been redesigned. This is all state-of-the-art technology here. All of the kit can be sterilised before use. You sterilise it in boiling water or in antiseptic fluids. And so if you compare this set to a Victorian set of equipment, all the Victorian equipment would have bone or wooden handles. You can't sterilise that.
Right.
You can sterilise all of this sort of stuff. This is, as I say, a general operating set. Tools for all sorts of operations. Amputations, neurosurgery, tracheostomies, you name it, it's there.
Brain surgery? There would be brain surgery happening?
One of the things they were using is magnets.
Right.
German shrapnel balls are made of steel. If you use an electromagnet and a blunted nail, you can put that into the brain and bring it out.
Wow.
So that's one of the things they're using. It sounds a bit barbaric.
Man, what?
And of course, with battlefield injury.
That worked? Like, neurosurgeon is one of the hardest surgeries, right? Today. And y'all was out here in the field with a magnet and a nail.
Some are more lucky than others.
That's
You might have a foot blown off or something. You might have shrapnel in your leg and you need potential surgery. Talk to me about the different sorts of operations that would have been done on the front.
Okay, so an amputation would be quite a common thing in a casualty clearing station. Okay, what I've got here is the Army issue amputation saw. It's for capital amputations. What I mean by that is a capital amputation is removing arms or legs. So
right.
Not decapitation. It's
Got
a big thing. It's not very good for you. Okay. You'd have to obviously knock them out first. You'd have to anaesthetise them. This is something called the Schimmelbusch mask. And to anaesthetise your patient, what they do is they place the mask over the patient's face and then drop chloroform or ether directly onto the mask, and then you inhale it.
So that's good to know.
So it really wasn't even no anesthesia. They was knocking people down with chloroform, and that okay. I feel like I might wake up with chloroform if I'm getting my leg, you know what I'm saying, removed.
Know that if they are going to go through amputations, they're not going to have to bite down on a bit of pencil or something.
Yes.
And even if they did, they would pass out from pain.
No access to antibiotics, which would be discovered a decade after the war had ended, it is easy to conjure up scenes of chaotic and horrifying conditions within the medical.
But so does anesthesia? That chloroform method, it works the same as anesthesia? Yes or no is the answer. Is the question I'm looking for, because anesthesia also slows your heart rate, doesn't it? Like it helps you from maybe not slows your heart rate, but it also helps you to bleed less during surgeries. Does that do that also? Chloro? That I don't think it does. I don't know.
Clearing stations and hospitals. The reality was to the contrary. Treatment facilities in this period were, ironically, far less archaic than the tactics employed on the battlefield. Portable X-ray machines, brought to the front by Marie Curie, were available to scan soldiers and aid in diagnosis, whilst blood banks had also been set up behind the front lines, ready for transfusions. Moreover, those who were unfortunate enough to suffer major facial disfigurement now had a source of hope.
Okay.
Many people came back with facial injuries from the First World War.
Right.
And it's a devastating thing to have. If your whole face has been smashed up by a gunshot wound or artillery explosion, then you need to have your face rebuilt. Plastic surgery doesn't really exist before the war. Enter somebody called Harold Gillies, who's a New Zealand surgeon, and he develops systems of rebuilding people's faces. He's not just rebuilding people's faces, he's also giving their lives back as well.
Wow. So an early form of sort of facial reconstruction.
Yes.
That's incredible. And would these soldiers then be sent back to the front line? I guess it depends on their injury.
Absolutely.
If it's a small shrapnel wound, they might be sent away for a bit, but
Yes.
they'd be sent back.
Absolutely. It depends on your injury, depends on if you can serve again. You could be medically downgraded. And so if you're not frontline material anymore, maybe you could work behind the lines in the warehouses or whatever behind the lines. But if you're well enough, you'd go back into action and back to the front.
Yeah, I'm
Non-stop.
trying to go to the
Never
warehouse.
stops, does it?
Even if you pulled through surgery and survived your battlefield wound, the biggest danger to your life was never far away. In fact, it was all around you. Having captured a significant amount of enemy territory, the German army often dug their trenches before the British and French, and on the highest ground possible. More inclined to stay put and defend their positions for an indefinite period of time, German soldiers reinforced their positions with concrete and steel beams.
In contrast,
Rebar.
British trenches were less protected, they were shallower, and if the heavens opened, and let's be honest, in Flanders they were always likely to, full of water. Now, unlike the German trenches, which had efficient drainage systems, British positions soon became these quagmires of mud and water. You see those images of troops wading through water up to their knees. This, of course, led to diseases which spread quickly throughout the network.
There were three main ailments, the so-called trench diseases, that became hugely problematic on the Western
Which ones? What they call? I'm interested.
Front during the war. The most notorious of these was called trench foot. The
Trench
prolonged
foot.
exposure to wetness and cold, especially in the lower limbs, caused troops immense
Hypothermia?
pain, swelling, blisters, and even nerve damage. If left untreated, gangrene would develop, often leading to amputation. Trench foot became a serious problem for the Allies, leading to 75,000 casualties in the British Army alone.
It says medical case.
Lice
sheet.
also plagued soldiers during World War I. Whilst there was no typhus outbreak, trench fever, caused by a related organism, had a severe impact on troops. The symptoms included severe headaches and muscle pains, leading to temporary incapacitation. With no effective treatment, soldiers required bed rest for recovery. Though fatalities were rare, up to 80% remained unfit for duty for months. 800,000 cases were recorded in the British forces. Lastly,
million?
trench mouth, or acute necrotizing ulcerative gingivitis, affected
Oh my god, that seems the worst.
soldiers in World War I trenches. This condition, caused by bacterial overgrowth, led to bleeding, ulceration, and bad breath. Painful gums made eating and talking difficult. Poor oral hygiene, stress, bad diet, lack of rest, and heavy smoking contributed to its onset.
To combat these nasty trench diseases, more attention was placed on basic hygiene, fumigation, irrigation, and sterilisation of clothing and bedding. Troops in flooded areas were soon issued with waterproof gumboots and waders, and these elevated duckboards were installed to keep the soldiers dry. Healthcare was improving, equipment was changing, weapons were evolving, and soldiers were adapting.
Despite these necessary adjustments, those at the top of Allied High Command knew that the best way of preserving lives was to end the war as quickly as possible. In an attempt to combat the stalemate, the British turned to mobile armoured vehicles, launching a top-secret weapons programme called the Tank Project. By January 1916, the first model was launched, the Mark I. Fitted with 20-metre-long Caterpillar tracks and armed with either 2 6-pounder naval guns or 4 Vickers machine guns, the British seemingly had a new superweapon that could break through the German lines. The opportunity to put these vehicles to the test came in the late summer of 1916. With the Somme offensive having already cost the Allies 300,000 casualties, Haig was desperate to stop the carnage and turned to his new weapon.
It makes sense that this was the first signs of tanks. When I heard, I had to think about it. I said it earlier, but the year would explain a lot. Like 1960, like this is a long time ago.
For a final push north of the Somme River, Haig had amassed 200,000 soldiers and 700 artillery pieces. But before he could launch his offensive, he had to eliminate a threat to his flank by clearing the Germans out of Delville Wood, just south of the villages of Flers and Courcelette. This would be the first battle in history in which tanks would lead the attack.
First battle in history in which tanks led the attack. We chalk that up. We salute the British for that.
3 of the 49 tanks Haig had at his disposal
Silver
drove
lining
in the
and
pre-dawn darkness through a bleak terrain of shell holes and splintered trees, what they described as Devil's Wood, the crew trusting their lives in their unproven new weapons.
Oh, I seen a movie. What movie is that where this happens? Oh my God. I feel like I watched it maybe at the end of last year.
Little time had passed before 2 of the vehicles were taken out of action, one breaking down and the other stuck on uneven ground.
Yeah.
But one tank, led by 23-year-old Captain Harold Mortimer, continued to push toward the German front lines. He described the whole event in his memoirs.
I didn't think my tank would be the first in the world to fire a shot in anger. The whole thing seemed very unreal. I saw lots of flashes coming from the edges of the woods, and I gave the order to open fire with one of the 6-pounders. And we managed to get astride one of the enemy trenches, but then received a direct hit. I lost my tracks.
All 3 tanks were lost, but in all of the chaos and confusion that they had caused, the British infantry were able to go forward and take Delville Wood. This allowed the bulk of Haig's army to push forward to the villages they intended to capture.
The British were to score a decisive victory at Flers Courcelette, with the villages captured and significant casualties inflicted on the German front divisions. Yet the wider offensive had been horrifically costly for all belligerents. After 141 days of battle, British, French and German forces recorded over 1 million casualties.
Jeez.
When the Battle of the Somme came to an end, 420,000 British men had lost their lives. Within the wreckage, a glimmer of hope nonetheless shone through. A sign that, perhaps, with further trial and error, the British may have found the key to unlocking the stalemate.
Tank. No, this is episode-y? Let me see.
In the next episode, we'll find out exactly what facing this new superweapon was like.
Oh, wow. This is a whole series. Alright, TLO, leave a like, comment, subscribe, turn on your post notification bells, man. Y'all let me know by hitting that like button if we should watch the next one. Because if not, then we won't. But I'm interested. I'm down for it. Y'all let me know. I'm gone.